For today's meeting, which means we have quorum. And we will move straight into the approval of minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve both of our
Make
minutes.
a motion to approve both the February 27th, 2024 minutes along with the March 26th, 2024.
Awesome. Second, and I think all in favor, aye.
Aye.
There's two of us, great. We will move right into our first presentation, which is our forestry and beautification tree planting program update. Mr. Robert Anderson, Director of Public Works, and Mr. Brian Niger, is that how you say last name? Niger, Superintendent of Forestry and Beautification. This was something that we were excited to get an update on, as well as we had some constituents ask some questions around the decisions that are made for tree planting around the city. So we're looking forward to hearing from you all. I'll pass the mic to you all.
Thank you. So today, as requested, I'm going to be talking about our reforestation program. As you can see on this first slide, our primary goal is the right tree in the right place. To start, I would like to talk about our reforestation team a little bit. We do have a reforestation coordinator, Weston Beck. We just hired him on 6 months ago to replace Ann Heiler, who had done it for many years. And to assist him, we have 5 certified arborists from the International Society of Arborists. And in addition to that, 2 of those arborists are municipal specialists, which is a additional certification you can get to specialize in municipal work. So our objectives, once again, right tree, right place. We plant 500 trees per year with this program. In managing the right-of-way canopy, we prioritize replanting those trees that have been removed either through because they were dead, diseased, or dying, or due to hurricane, storm damage, stuff like that. In the replanting, we do try to diversify the canopy. We don't want a complete canopy failure, as what had been seen with the American elm. A lot of cities planted it because it's a really great, beautiful growing tree. And in the 1920s, the Dutch elm disease came through and deforested a lot of cities on the eastern seaboard. We want to avoid that. So we try to diversify what trees we plant in the right-of-way. And lastly, we do plant for beautification. If you go over there to the Taylor Street Garage, you'll see some palm trees we planted there to beautify that a little bit, as well as the Doolittle trees that we worked in conjunction with the Doolittle Raider Foundation. Dominion needed them removed because they were getting into the transmission lines right there on Gervais Street at the bridge. We went ahead and replanted them so that we could continue to honor the Doolittle Raiders.
I will say Taylor Street with the new paint and everything looks it looks a lot better.
Awesome. We like to hear that. The site selection. In our site selection, there are various considerations that determine the right tree for the right place. This list here, it's not exhaustive, but I would really like to touch on the utility section of this. For the underground utilities, we've got to watch out for water meters, sewer lines, or storm drains that would prevent a tree from being planted. Overhead utilities, that's why you see a canopy tree removed and a smaller tree put back, because we've got to plant a smaller tree to replace that so it won't get into the utility lines in the future. There's also a difference between state roads and city roads. With the state roads, we do need an encroachment permit and a maintenance agreement from SCDOT, and we get that every year. They also have a trees to avoid list that we match to our list. If there is a curb, a hard curb, we can plant 1.5 feet from the roadside. However, if there's a valley gutter, we cannot plant within 10 feet of that valley gutter. That can limit us from planting on roads where we have limited right-of-way area. And of course, we do have to look at the location of sidewalks and utilities. And then the city roads, once again, the size of the right-of-way, we can install smaller trees closer to the road with the valley gutters because we don't have that restriction. And obviously, sidewalks and utilities.
So does SCDOT help fund any of the tree planting?
No, ma'am. If they had their way, we would remove every tree along every road.
It's not right.
So our tree selection. This is our copy of our tree recommendations that we keep updated in our division. It is a living list. On this list are trees, small, medium, and large, that we have found grows in every soil condition within the entire city. The reason we do that is it means we don't have to take a soil sample every time we want to plant one of our 500 trees, which then industrializes the process, and we can get all 500 trees in our planting season. Going back to the living list, we have talked to the Native Plant Society and some other groups about adding to this list. If you have a recommendation, we'll be happy to add it to the list. It just has to be able to grow in all of our right-of-way areas. And this takes us to our yearly process. So to start with, we try to identify the site. This is primarily pulled from our tree removal list. I will say we have been planting more trees than we've removed, so sometimes we do identify new sites. But the first thing we do is we will go ahead and inform the citizen via door hanger. That door hanger you see right there is what we send to them. This is put inside a plastic bag, which is hung on their door, so that it's visible from the roadway. Once we do that, we select the tree, trying to bring the adjacent property owner into the discussion, because obviously they're the ones who are going to have to look at it, and we want to be good neighbors. And then we locate the tree with a flag and then paint a circle around it, and then bring another door hanger to it and put it on their door. Same thing, so that they know we're planning on planting here, here's the flag, and trying to be as upfront and transparent as we can. Then 811 can utilize that as well as SEDOT to locate and let us know if it's a good site or not. Our planting season is from October to March. We then water the trees with a water truck for 1 year after that. And then we do young tree pruning every 3 years. We do that twice. And then we do maintenance for that tree for the lifetime of the tree. I do want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about our Beat the Heat grant. The kickoff is scheduled for July 13th. There will be a press conference, and you will receive an invitation to that shortly. We will hold an educational event to discuss the benefits of trees while giving vouchers for trees, 300 trees a year, 1,500 trees over a 5-year period to be planted on private property. And lunch will be served there as well. This is the map that identifies the areas we are targeting. It's based off the Justice 40 map overlaid with our neighborhood map. There are 52 neighborhoods that are involved in this, and these are the neighborhoods we will be targeting. Also, I would like to point out here that due to these grants that have been given out for planting trees from the EPA, there is actually a tree shortage coming up, so we are trying to find ways to mitigate that issue moving forward for our planting and also for this grant. I'm also pleased to announce that we do have a 45-year designation as a Tree City USA. We are the longest running city in the state to have this designation, and this reforestation program has been very instrumental in allowing us to keep this designation. And I would be remiss if I did not mention Mr. Councilman Howard Duvall and the rest of council, as you guys have supported us through this. And I want to thank you guys for your continued support in this program.
So a couple of questions I have. There is a tree, someone reached out to me that said was a invasive species that we have on Assembly Street. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It could be a Bradford pear. That's another issue that we're having. They've been planted for 30 plus years.
Okay.
If I were to assign a crew to start taking down every Bradford pear, just that's all they do, it'd be about 3 years before they finish.
Okay.
So what we've been doing is we've been trimming them, and then as they are dead, diseased, or dying, we remove them and replace them with something else.
Okay. Why were
It was similar to the American elm. It was a really quick growing tree that provided shade quick, but as you know, is usually never a good plant.
How long have we been not planting Bradford pears, Brian?
At least 20 years.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Since I
Right.
About 20 years in the right
It
of
was
way.
in vogue there 25 years ago, 30 years ago. That was,
And then I think Councilman Bailey and I were at this meeting from Melrose Heights. They had a question about the fact that their cabling is underground, but there's been some mixed messaging from the city around whether or not they can have more trees planted. And they felt that their neighborhood had an exception because of some of the cabling considerations that you all take into for other neighborhoods. Just wanted to talk about that briefly. They wanted more trees planted, and I think the city said no.
So it really depends on the size of the right-of-way as to whether or not we can plant. And
Okay.
that could be a consideration on there, but I will definitely look into that.
Okay.
Projects, stop sidewalk.
Yeah, with 60% of the city's roads being SC dot roads, this goes back to the curb versus sidewalk versus
Got it.
that. We've got to make sure that we are not interfering with a lot of these roads. We have other stakeholders that we've got to take into consideration.
Okay. Councilman,
Scheduled? I know there was supposed to be a ceremony for it.
We scheduled 3 times, but
We're done. We're getting there.
Okay.
So,
But it is going to be rescheduled. We're just trying to work around everybody's schedule on that.
Got it.
do you have any goals like that align with, so we've seen that heat map study, we've seen that we're not where we should be in canopy. Do you all make yearly goals or 5-year goals, 10-year goals? How do you measure success in terms of getting us to a point where we have more greenery?
So I will say we're trying to increase our survival rate of our trees. I think about 3 years ago, we had a 33% loss.
Okay.
Last year due to, and no, being our water truck driver, we lost no trees. So we had 100% survival rate for this last year. I'm very happy.
Great.
The biggest goal that we try to hit now is our survival rates, because last year I took down 304, planted 500. The year prior, we took down 320, 100. So we're increasing the canopy. The biggest issue we've been running into is survival rates, and you can handle that by size of tree you plant. That's why we go with a 15-gallon. By determining what nurseries are sending you the bad trees that are dying quickly because they've over-fertilized them while they were there. You can also work on that with watering and making sure that they're kept an eye on throughout the year.
Has there been any conversation about building in an agreement when we, say, bring in a new business and they have to plant trees on their property? How does that work? Do we normally do that, or?
So, question to the planning department, but from what I understand, there is a tree density requirement for all names.
there's a planning requirement, specific list of allowable trees on private property.
Based on-
Yeah, we can get that out of Brussels.
Okay.
Brian, touch on our aging tree canopy and the mature neighborhood trees that we're seeing everywhere.
That is another issue that we're running into. We do have a lot of willow oaks in the city. We also have a lot of just aging canopy, which is why we have branches falling a good bit. We're trying to manage that. We're trying to get that taken care of. One of the best parts about this reforestation program is we can take down some of these older that have reached the end of their life cycle and then replant them with something that will be there 30, 40 years down the road. Another consideration we're taking into account is we moved in 1991 A, 2012 we were a 7B, and in 2023 we're now an 8A, 8B, now we're a 9A on our temperate zone. So in looking forward at heat, we're trying to go ahead and look at trees that do really well in Florida areas or Alabama or Georgia and try to bring them north so that they can, we're trying to look ahead on that since we're seeing that trend.
Trending warmer.
Trending warmer, yes, sir. And that goes back to our, the tree selection list that we have here.
And most of these trees are funded through what, general fund and
Yes, ma'am.
grants that we get?
The 500 trees we plant are funded through general fund. The 1,500 trees we're trying to get planted on private property will be funded purely through the grant.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time you guys gave to me.
Thank you.
And Brian, will you just email us about the Melrose Heights question that we had? Okay. Thank you. All right, next up, we will move into committee discussion and start with yard trash policy. Mr. Robert Anderson, Director of Public Works. This is in direct response to some of the discussions that Councilwoman Herbert presented to council and referred this formally to committee at our last council meeting.
So thank you, and I'm going to answer a little bit about Brian's last question. I think a lot of the issues in Melrose Heights are sidewalk versus curb in its growth area. I think there's like 3 or 4 feet, am I correct, Sarah? In that area, and it makes it hard to plant a big tree. First thing, it doesn't want to pop up the sidewalk, so I think we're going to find out some of that.
Okay.
But I'm going to go into, and not taking away anything from our superintendent of solid waste, Samantha, here about doing this presentation, but one of the reasons I'm doing it is I might hold a little of the older history of what we're actually doing with solid waste. So solid waste, of course, includes the garbage, the recycling, the roll carts. A lot of people don't know, but we have AM collection and PM collection. Every night around 10:30, there's a garbage truck that actually comes out of our office, services all Main Street, some of the litter containers in the Vista, services stuff in 5 Points. When 5 Points, or when the city was designed years ago, unfortunately, it wasn't designed for the perfect garbage collection. So there are carts on the curbs, and what we try to do is get them dumped at night, so they're off the curb by 9:30 the next day. We have our yard trash, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. We have our litter collection, which these 2 crews rove around the city, mainly collecting main thoroughfares, which is our residential street sweepers. There are actually 2 residential street sweepers, I believe, around 97 or 8. And then we have our commercial street sweepers. So each night on Main Street and the Vista and sidewalks are actually blown off and street sweepers sweep everything. Then that crew actually comes back in around 2 or 3 o'clock on Sunday morning and do it once again. So they work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday morning, everything off and sweep everything again to make sure the town's clean. A couple years ago, we added a roll-off container, which is really a hook lift. We have a compost operation. We're going to talk a lot more about front loaders and dumpsters today than we talk anything. So those are most of the services solid waste provides directly. So our next slide talks about vintage roll cart, but it's also the reason why I guess I'm doing this presentation is I might be a little bit vintage, but I was riding around about 6 months ago, and I got to share the story on the cart on the left. So I was riding around, I called Samantha and I said, you got to come get this cart right now. I said, it really has a lot of history in the solid waste division. She goes, well, what could possibly be the history? I said, well, it's an A model roll cart. If you actually look at the number on it, it starts with an A. It means that cart was made in 1980. So yes, I was excited about that. So that cart is a 1980 model.
1980?
Yeah, it is. It is in pristine condition. So we now have it at our office. So it shows you how far we've come with roll carts. But in the early 1990s, council had a lot of discussion about elemosynary area or tax exempts not paying for services. I've actually heard our council talk about that recently this year, last year. So council at that time decided that tax exempt properties we would develop a billing system for that. So we developed a billing system, and that billing system was to anybody we provided services to, not limited to churches, parsonages, state and local governments. So anybody that was tax exempt. Unfortunately, part of that, as I found out, were very clearly back in my day, I found out that also included a lot of World War II vets, that if you were wounded in service, you no longer had to pay taxes. They sat at my desk many days talking about how they couldn't afford to pay the bills council had passed on to them. But we also had a dumpster service back then. We had a full front end loader container dumpster service. I was trying to remember the other day, I believe we had 7 routes is what we had. So those routes went out twice a week, and they picked up anything from a business, a restaurant, an apartment complex, church. So for years there was no fees attached. Then council in the 1990s elected to start charging fees for the dumpster services and the roll cart services. So in 2009, council, as part of some of the budget implications we had, elected to get out of the front loader dumpster service completely. So there was some exceptions to that. So the exceptions was, and this is probably the hardest exception there was for residential front end loader dumpsters. And that was a very hard understanding
What
is
is
what
that?
was truly residential. To be classified as truly residential, you have to be 51% owner occupied, and you have to provide those documents to the city of Columbia that says you're owner occupied by 51%, and we still provide the front loader service to those locations today. We have about 40, I believe, 40 dumpster services. I don't know, about 20 of them are owner occupied maybe. And like I said, so they have to provide those documents to us to make sure that they're owner occupied, not just rental properties. So when we had these discussions back in 2009, we discussed what went with them. And what went with them was the elimination of services, not only the dumpster service, but the yard trash service. So the apartments, the businesses, the tax exempt, the Alamos area properties, and in 2009, all lost all of those services. Council was very aware of it at that time. They elected to turn it over, and I'll mention a couple things. Jeff's not here, he was earlier, that they're going to allow the private companies to come into Columbia, whomever they are, and charge their rates or whatever. I still think the city's missing out on not charging franchise fees to the outlying customers, to the businesses that are doing service in Columbia. It would be a great revenue generator, but we've talked about that over the years, and I think it's maybe a harder deal than it would. So back then, everything was, here you go. When we got out of the services back in 2009, we eliminated all the rest of the services. So the rest of the stuff that I have today is more ordinance driven. It's materials to be placed by occupant. It talks about we pick up non-household such as rubbish. Building materials resulting from normal household must be removed from the premises by the occupant. That's where we get into the yard waste and all that. Of course, the retail and commercial establishments of used appliances, furniture, tires, shipping units, boxes, they have to exceed containerization for roll carts, that they also have to move them. And then there was restriction on collections that we talk a lot about. So trees, shrubbery, underbrush resulting from land clearing, either by the health department or otherwise, has to be moved by the city without charge. And commercial cuttings, that's where we get a lot of, commercial cuttings, we see a lot of commercial businesses in town. What they're doing is they're cutting down trees, and they'll leave the tree out to the curb for us to pick up. So we're stuck with some pretty massive piles, as you saw in one of the other ones. Then we talk about bulk containers. This is where we get into the 51% owner occupied, and they have to provide services to us that council elected to pass on back in the 90s. We talk a lot about units. We talk about anything that's over 6 or more units in the city of Columbia has to be serviced by a dumpster. Then we get into a rate structure that I think one of the questions today will be, when has this rate structure ever been changed? And the answer would be not since 1990. So we developed rate structures back in 1994, and they're not included for the dumpsters and stuff. They have been eliminated. But it talks about roll carts. It talks about tax exempt properties. It talks about the number 4 talks about the basic service and the low volume, mean volume, and high volume. That is actually completely directed at only Main Street and 5 Points. Since a lot of those places don't have locations to put dumpsters, we actually charge them by the quantity of stuff they put on the street. And the bottom one is what we use as our homeowners do construction projects in the city. This is what we use in our rate structures for that. So we have a lot of do-it-yourselfers. I'm a do-it-yourselfer. I think Brian is, I know. So if you tore out your kitchen, you want to put it on the curb, we have a rate structure to do that with. So we fall back on that rate structure. That rate structure also falls back with code enforcement and theirs. So I believe the question of the day is that Councilman Herbert was asking about was about our rates. And there was a question of, somebody has put a lot of material out on the street of why wouldn't we collect that for free? And I believe that church that we're talking about, the gentleman spoke at our last council meeting, is that church falls under a tax exempt eleemosynary property, which we no longer provide services to based on council's history back in the 90s. I hope I haven't bored you with a lot
Oh,
of
this is very helpful. Any questions?
So has the city previously been picking up yard debris out there? Where the church that brought this to Councilwoman Herbert's attention?
If we have, it would have been clearly by mistake, and I don't think so. I don't know.
Do we ever pick anything up and bill people later?
No, we actually, so if you would call our office right now, Councilman, and say, hey, I've got this, I've torn down a shed in my backyard and I put it on the street, we're going to make you pay us before we put it up. We'll actually send a supervisor by. He will do that. We will not take cash on the street. Of course, we'll only take check or money order, and you'll have to come by our office and pay it.
And then if somebody did something like that, like a residential do-yourselfer, put a bunch of stuff out, and they never got removed, would y'all typically
Turn them over to code enforcement.
Okay.
And then code enforcement, my understanding is, we would pick it up, we send code enforcement the bill, more or less. Code enforcement, I believe, puts a lien on the property. I can't speak for David Hatcher on that. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very helpful. No other questions on my end, so we can move on. I think, Robert, this is gonna be you again too, so, last but not least, we have, the Columbia signage discussion. This is just a follow-up discussion on a longtime project that we've been working on, that we had paused with the new branding, and have been working on largely in the, Economic Development Committee. So I would like for us to take this back to that committee, but Councilman Bailey wanted to keep you up to date on something I'm really excited about, something we've been working on. And this is the new signage. There's going to be several iterations of this signage, to replace the, signs all across the city, to be more cohesive and welcoming. So I'll pass it over to you.
So I will probably ask a lot more questions than a presentation. So what we did is we went back to our sign company, and then we sent this with the new Crawford fonts, and we sent it back. This is what they came back with. They came back with, it was a little bit of a change from the original. I'm going to skip a couple slides here. It was a little bit of change from the original. So the original one we had was on the upper right, the new one's on the lower left. So we changed the font, they changed the rivers to where they were, more solid colors to the more waves on that. So I guess my early question would be, is this something that we like? Do we see anything we want to change on it? The only person I had in my staff that looked at it said, well, are the waves too quick or too wavy? And I'm like, I really don't know. I think the City of Columbia part looks good. I will tell you that it has another model. This is what it would look like at night when it's illuminated. So it will be backlit. It'll have some lighting on it. And it's a pretty simple deal. This is what the ones that'll look like in just general areas on the upper right. And then this would be the smaller sign or the secondary sign that would go in secondary entrances. So I will stop there and let you guys talk about the design a little bit.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. This is something that we want to have, of course, the larger signs at the major gateways, like off the highways. I think there's been 5 that have been identified. The smaller versions, both what are they called? The actual sign and the
The actual sign's secondary and it's
tertiary. Okay, the secondary and tertiary signs would be where they make sense. Oftentimes we see some old signs like between Forest Acres and the City of Columbia or Richland County and the City of Columbia. So obviously we've replaced those. And I think the goal is that there were, I think, 18 different, potential, sign locations identified. I think, Councilman Brown and I wanted to have some staff recommendations for those secondary and tertiary signs. But that being said, Tyler, would love any feedback that you have before we take this to all of council.
Well, I think y'all have done a great job with the signs, and I have no comment about the waves, one way or the other.
Nor did I.
That's outside of my expertise, but I like the idea of those gateway signs being visible when people are coming in from, 26 or off of 20, other places in the city. So I'm excited to see what proposed locations for the tertiary signs. Did I say that right on my first time? Yeah, I'm using the word.
And for that, I'd like if whoever the appropriate person is to just do an audit of where we do, you might already have this, where we do have those smaller blue signs that say like a world-class city or whatever.
The only thing I know is I get a call or a text from the mayor and he said, there's a sign here, remove it.
Yeah.
So, I know one of them was in the middle of the river on Jarvis Patman Boulevard that stuck out over the river. Never knew the sign was there. There's no sign there right now. The good news is our sign shop should be able to produce the smaller sign, the tertiary sign. They should be able to actually produce that in-house. So that'll be something we can do very quickly. A lot of them used to be, one of them was on Harbison Boulevard, or believe it or not, there used to be one entering Lost Creek Drive at our neighborhood and some other. So they're going to be easy to pop up. It's going to be the other ones that's going to be a little more difficult for us to fund.
So Robert, we had $500,000 worth of funding set aside.
That was my next question. Yeah, like based on the funding, I would really love a recommendation of like the first, maybe it's the 5 signs that we do first, and then, the secondary and tertiary. I just want an understanding of what's feasible with what we've allocated.
So with that 500,000, I think you've identified 4 primary locations to start talking about, and we think we'll have funding left over to do several secondaries, and then the tertiaries, again, are our sign shop printing, so we can roll with those
yeah.
pretty quickly.
So the primary signs, and I've just picked some locations. Of course, one of them is at Harbison, one of them is at Hughie Street and Elmwood. Thank you. So, but I don't know that having 2 primary signs, within the same area that I'll see every morning coming to town is the right thing. The one at Bull, makes probably quite a bit of sense right there at Bull when you come in at Hardin Street. I just chose a location on Garner's Ferry. Maybe we'll work with our public information department or somebody on picking the solid locations of where these go. But where the sign prices were somewhere around the $70,000 mark, once we start getting electricity to them, the grade changes is going to change some of the brick elevations higher on one side or lower to make sure they're level and how they do that. So I think there'll be some added cost of getting electricity and stuff there in the Millbank.
So one thing I do want us to take a look at is Fort Jackson, because MBLG has been working on the beautification that way. And then, of course, the I-20 entrance past Greenview, that I'm not sure if that's in the city, but that might be something to explore as well, as a 5th gateway.
Yeah, I was the other day was looking at the map and I'm like, okay, you got North Main, you got Fairfield, believe it or not, Farrow Road intersection's not in.
Yeah, see, that's another one.
Right
If
after that,
Councilman McDowell was here, he'd be like, where's Farrow? But yeah, we should look into Farrow as well. And again, once we price these out, it might make sense, like, and this is a larger conversation with council, like, what do we consider the biggest gateways? Where do we see the most traffic come in? That's where the biggest signs probably should go. Maybe then the smaller versions of these should go in the secondary gateways. And then, of course, anywhere that there's a city line, it would be great to have the sign shop. But yeah, this is a great, and that's where I would really lean on your team, Robert, to give us some starting point so we can help decide that.
We can do that.
But it looks great.
And I think those 4 that you've already, I think you're gonna catch high traffic volume there. We need to look at what's the next highest traffic volume if we're gonna do a 5th
Yeah,
one.
and I answer questions with questions a lot as I looked at Garner's Ferry Road, and I forgot exactly what intersection that was. It was after Holbrook. As the city grows and we annex, this sign becomes, we almost need a staple landmark to put a sign or something that says because that says here I am, because when you annex 5 years from now, that sign may be, a mile away from where we annexed or something. And I think we got to keep that into mind also as we do
And
this.
you were intending, Robert, to include, a thoroughfare like Garner's Ferry versus the I-77 exchange coming where you would get off at Garner's? Are those meant to also go on the secondary roads versus the highway at gateways?
I think they could go wherever we would all, I know this one here is just a good solid gateway on Bull Street. And I believe this is a solid gateway. I'm not sure the Garner's Ferry sign is truly in the right location. The Harbison sign, maybe it's a secondary sign.
That's what I was
It's just-
thinking, like some of our business districts, like North Main, Harbison, Garner's Ferry, like those could be secondary signs and really reserve the investment for those out-of-towners or people coming to visit the city for the big signs,
Okay.
yeah.
And that's good feedback that we can actually use that to put some of the signs out there.
And you would still capture that corridor if you did more of the 77.
The 77 Garner's Ferry.
Imagine coming in, like people are coming in for game days. And catch that,
Yeah, that whole area.
So, if y'all are okay with the appearance, then I think we take the appearance to all of council and also a map showing primary locations, secondary locations, and then as we know, the tertiary locations, that proposal for y'all to,
Yes, I think we're at the point between this committee and economic development. I think 5 out of the 7 of us have probably seen it. I know Councilman Herbert's listening, and the mayor is aware. So I think it would make sense if we have them give us immediate feedback on the appearance and then really start narrowing down. And I want to be able to convey to the public that this is a work in progress, right? I would like to include as many of our neighborhoods and business districts as we can, but that also requires funding. So start with the ones that see the most traffic and then have a list that we can then kind of work our way over the next couple of years. So, my initial reaction of the waves as I'm looking about it, it feels very like coastal city to me. I really like the old kind of very, subtle. So because you already have the squigglies in the sea, part of me wants to not have it at the bottom. But that's my initial reaction. We're not a beach town, so. Why are you smiling? Because I know you thought that. You didn't want to say it, did you?
Here's what I would say about this sign. I mean, there's always an opportunity for somebody to play, sideline quarterback. I'm not a sign designer. I agree with Councilwoman Bustles wholeheartedly about the waves. It is very wavy. I'm thinking in my head, I'm at the beach, Hilton Head, Pawleys Island, something like that. The other is a little more subtle, but
the amplitude of the waves is greater on the bottom than it is even in our logo.
Yeah, it's a little too much.
I mean, we could scrap the waves completely.
Did they do a version with the subtle?
That's what I was thinking. Take the subtle back to this one.
Can we?
Yeah, can we do a merge of that? I think,
Already made a
based
note.
on even the feedback that council had when we were looking at the different logos, I don't know if that will be as popular. I know I think we should cherish and embrace the Three Rivers, I think we have, but, we're the heart of South Carolina, not the coast.
And I do like and I'll give my little opinion. I think the subtle waves would look better down here with the backlit as the original version.
Yes,
They look better.
So if you could bring that back, and then we can start talking about, maybe, city manager, we could put this on a work session
Sure,
sometime in the summer after we get through budgeting and start working on, yeah.
absolutely. And I would even let Crawford play a little bit with the color palette, just to see what they come back with.
If I might, 'cause I hadn't thought about that as well. And the more subtle
The
waves,
secondary
it has the
colors.
3 colors that we have in the flag.
Uh-huh.
The 3 rivers is represented in the flag rather than the 3 new branding colors. So I thought maybe that's,
Well, the flag colors and the 3D branding colors are supposed to be the same
right, there's
now,
the
but,
white in there.
Yeah, but the white looks cool, I do like
Yeah.
that, it's not as river, yeah, okay.
but I was meaning even those other secondary colors from the palette, just to maybe give them an idea of what some of those will look like, the greens and the.
And I'll go back and talk to our company that's doing this and see if we can't settle them down a little bit.
I'm sure Councilman Brown will have some opinions too, so stay tuned. And then one more thing, I don't know what they thought about the welcome to. They just wanted,
I think they just took it off. I think that to do that, if we would actually go back to the subtles, they may be able to bring this down. I think it's your call whether you want welcome to.
can you ask them to do a version with that too, with the subtle? But yeah, very excited for next steps.
So I will ask, are we wanting to welcome to City of Columbia? Welcome to City of Columbia, South Carolina, which I think everybody should know where they're at when they get here. If they're not, they probably need to be arrested. So
I'm fine with City of but that's only because I've seen other signs, like it just says, welcome to Chester County, welcome to Rock Hill. You know, I think unless you're on the line of North Carolina and South Carolina, most people just focus on their city. But if that's something that does come up, I mean, I'm adapt. I'm just very excited to see our new look and feel in terms of visual, and the fact that we have secured funding, like I'm happy with all those things, so I'm open to however we wanna move forward.
Great.
Awesome, looks great. Well, we will revisit this at a work session then.
great. I will get some stuff done.
Any other business, Councilman Bailey?
None for me.
All right, well, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 1:44.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.